The message came through at the worst possible time. Not just emotionally, but logistically. I was halfway across the world in a small, dusty village in Zambia, working on a community development project that sounded a lot more glamorous on paper than it felt in real life. Most days were spent dealing with unreliable electricity, limited clean water, and the kind of heat that made your brain feel slow. Out there, everything worked on chance. Power? Maybe for an hour. Cell service? If you were lucky. Internet? Forget it. So whenever your phone buzzed, you didn't wait. You checked it immediately because you had no idea if you'd still have signal 10 seconds later. That's exactly what I did when her message came through. I remember sitting on a rough wooden bench outside the small house I was staying in. The sun was going down, and the sky had that deep orange glow that almost made everything feel peaceful, until I unlocked my phone. The message was short. Too short. No build-up, no warning, just a clean cut. She said she was done, that she couldn't do this anymore, that we needed to get divorced. I stared at the screen for a long time, reading it over and over like somehow the words would rearrange themselves into something less final. They didn't. At first, I didn't even react. It didn't feel real, like it was meant for someone else, or like I'd opened the wrong message thread. But it was definitely her. Back home, in Europe, finishing up her project, while I was out here, thousands of miles away, with barely enough connection to reply. Looking back now, I should have seen it coming. We weren't exactly falling apart in some dramatic way, but we weren't growing either. We'd settled into this weird routine where everything turned into a competition. It sounds funny when you say it out loud, and at first it was. We had a whiteboard in our apartment that kept score of everything, not just actual games like cribbage, but random daily stuff too. Who walked more steps? Who cooked more meals? Who won a TV show by predicting the ending better? We even competed over survival shows, guessing who would last the longest, arguing over strategy like we were out there ourselves. It wasn't toxic, not at the beginning. It was playful. We'd drink wine, sometimes a little too much, order takeout, sit on the couch with our phones or controllers, and turn every simple game into a full-on rivalry. And one of those games was Angry Birds. Yeah, that game. We took it way too seriously. If one of us beat a level or got a higher score, the other one would stay up late just to beat it back. There were nights where we'd both pretend to go to sleep, then quietly grab our phones under the covers to outdo each other. It was stupid, but it was also kind of ours. That's what made her message hit harder. Because it wasn't just the marriage ending, it was all those little shared things disappearing too. And I didn't handle it well, not even close. That night I got drunk, really drunk. The kind of drunk where you stop thinking and start reacting. The villagers had this homemade corn liquor, strong stuff. It burned going down and didn't ask permission before hitting your brain. I drank way more than I should have, and then I did what a lot of people regret later. I started texting. Angry texts, bitter texts, the kind of messages you think feel justified in the moment but look embarrassing the second you're sober. I said things I didn't mean. Or maybe I did mean them, but not in the way they came out. Either way, it didn't help. Her response was quick and cold. She froze our joint bank account. Now, if you're sitting in a city somewhere, that's already stressful. But out there, it was a real problem. Getting to an ATM wasn't simple. It could take hours, and even when you got there, there was no guarantee it would work. No power, no network, no cash inside. And now, if everything worked perfectly, I couldn't access anything. That was the moment things stopped feeling like just a breakup and started feeling like a full-on collapse. I remember lying in bed that night under a mosquito net, staring up at the fabric like it could somehow give me answers. The room was dark, except for a small flashlight I kept next to me. My head was spinning from the alcohol, from the heat, from everything. I felt angry, hurt, embarrassed, and honestly, pretty pathetic. I kept thinking about how fast everything flipped. one message, and suddenly my life looked completely different. At some point, I picked up my phone again. Miraculously, I had signal. Not strong, not stable, but enough. For a second, I thought about calling her. The game loaded slowly. Out there, even something as simple as opening an app felt like waiting for a miracle. The connection flickered, the screen froze once or twice, and I almost gave up. But then, it finally opened. That familiar music started playing. Light, silly, completely out of place with everything going on in my life at that moment. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, not really sure why I'd even opened it. Maybe it was habit. Maybe it was comfort. Or maybe it was just the only thing that still felt normal. Then I tapped into the leaderboard, and that's when I saw it. Her name, right there, at the top. Higher scores, more levels completed, progress I didn't even recognize. While I'd been out there dealing with broken power lines, drinking cheap liquor, and blowing up my life, she had been playing, winning, the same way we always did. For a second, I just stared at it. It felt ridiculous to care. Like my marriage had just ended, my bank account was locked, I was stuck in the middle of nowhere, and somehow what got to me was a mobile game score. But it wasn't really about the game. It was about what it meant. She had already moved on, not just emotionally, but mentally. She wasn't sitting around thinking about us, replaying memories, or wondering what went wrong. She was just continuing and winning. That's when something shifted in me. Not something healthy, not something mature, just something small, bitter, and very, very human. I remembered something. We had a shared Apple account. At the time, it made sense. It was easier for apps, purchases, all that stuff. We never thought twice about it. And apparently, we had never disconnected it. Which meant one thing. I still had access. I sat up a little straighter under the mosquito net, suddenly more awake than I'd been all night. The alcohol was still there, but now it had direction. I wasn't just drunk and sad anymore. I was focused. The kind of focus that only comes from a bad idea that feels really good in the moment. I clicked into the account settings. It took a few tries. The signal kept dropping in and out. Each tap felt like it might be the last one before everything disconnected again. But somehow, it worked. Everything loaded. And there it was. Her profile. All her progress. Every level, every high score, every little piece of that stupid competition we'd built together. Months, maybe years of tiny victories. I could have closed the app right there. I could have laughed it off. I could have even taken it as a sign that maybe, somewhere deep down, we were still connected in a weird way. But I didn't, because I wasn't thinking clearly. I was thinking emotionally. And emotionally, I felt like I had lost everything. So I wanted to win something. Even if it was small. Even if it was meaningless. Even if it was petty. Especially if it was petty. My thumb hovered over the screen for a second. There was this tiny voice in the back of my head saying, "Don't do this. This is dumb. You're gonna regret it." But that voice was quiet, and the rest of me was loud. So I ignored it. A few taps. That's all it took. Delete. No confirmation pop-up, no dramatic moment. Just gone. Her entire Angry Birds profile disappeared like it had never existed. All those late nights, all those silent competitions, all those tiny wins she probably didn't even think twice about anymore. Erased in seconds. I stared at the screen, waiting for something to happen. For a message, for the app to crash, for the universe to somehow call me out on what I'd just done. But nothing happened. The game just sat there, quiet and unchanged. Except now her name wasn't on the leaderboard anymore, and mine was. At the top. For the first time in a long time, I won. And instead of feeling guilty right away, I felt satisfied. It was ridiculous, completely childish. But in that moment, it felt like I had taken back a tiny piece of control. Like I wasn't just the guy who got dumped over a text while stuck in the middle of nowhere. I was still part of the game. Still playing, still capable of hitting back. Then, because apparently I hadn't learned anything yet, I took it one step further. I changed my username. Even that felt harder than it should have been. The screen lagged, the connection dropped twice. I had to re-enter everything slowly, carefully, like I was carving it into stone. And what I typed wasn't clever, it wasn't funny, it wasn't even particularly original. It was just raw. Fuck you, B. Simple, direct, no room for misunderstanding. If she ever opened the game, and I knew she would, she'd see it. She'd know exactly what happened, and she'd know exactly who did it. I put the phone. I woke up the next morning with a dry mouth, a pounding headache, and that slow, creeping feeling that I had done something I probably shouldn't have. For a few seconds, I just lay there under the mosquito net, staring at the ceiling, trying to piece together the night before. The text, the drinking, the messages I sent, the bank account, and then the game. I closed my eyes for a moment and let out a long breath. Yeah, that happened. There was no taking it back, no undo button, no way to pretend it was a glitch or a mistake. I knew exactly what I had done, and I knew she would figure it out just as quickly. But the strange thing was, I didn't feel as bad as I expected. Not good, not proud, just neutral. Like it had already been filed away in my brain as something that belonged to a different version of me, the drunk, angry version from the night before. The village was already alive outside. I could hear people talking, footsteps in the dirt, distant laughter. Life was moving forward like nothing had happened, which, I guess, was the truth. Nothing had changed. My situation was still the same, the marriage was still over, the bank account was still frozen, and I was still stuck trying to figure out what came next. I sat up slowly and reached for my phone. No signal. Of course. Part of me was almost relieved. It gave me time. Time before the reaction. Time before whatever message or silence would come from her. I went through the day in a bit of a fog. Work helped. It always did. There was something about focusing on real physical problems, fixing something, building something, helping someone, that kept my mind from drifting too far. But every now and then it crept back in. A random thought. She's gonna see it. And then another. She's gonna know it was me. And then the one I tried not to think about too much. She's probably not even going to care. That last one stuck with me more than anything else. Because deep down, I think that's what hurt the most. Not the anger, not the breakup, just the idea that I had become irrelevant. That whatever we had, those late nights, those stupid competitions, those little shared moments, meant more to me than they did to her. By the time evening rolled around, I finally got a bit of signal again. Not strong, but enough. I stared at my phone for a while before unlocking it. Part of me didn't want to check. Part of me wanted to just leave it alone and pretend none of it happened. But curiosity always wins. I opened my messages. There was one from her. Short. Of course it was short. That was her style. It said, "Really?" That was it. No long rant, no anger, no insults. Just one word. And somehow that hit harder than anything else could have. Because it wasn't explosive. It was disappointed. I read it a few times, then locked my phone again. I didn't reply, not because I didn't have anything to say, but because, for once, I realized there wasn't anything worth saying. What could I even write? An apology, it would sound weak. An explanation, there wasn't a good one. Another angry message, that would just make it worse. So I did nothing. And that was the end of it. No big final argument, no dramatic closure, just silence. Over time, things settled. The divorce went through, we split what we had, what was left of it anyway. I figured out my finances, slowly, painfully, but I managed. I stayed in Zambia for a while longer, finished the project, and eventually made my way back to something that looked like a normal life. And little by little, the intensity of it all faded. The anger turned into reflection, the embarrassment turned into acceptance, and the whole situation, what felt like the biggest moment of my life at the time, became just a story. I don't drink anymore. That was one of the changes that stuck. It's funny how one bad night can show you exactly where your limits are. As for her, I don't really know what she's doing now. We don't talk, haven't for a long time. Sometimes I think about reaching out, just to say something normal, something human. But then I don't, because some chapters are better left closed. Do I miss her? Yeah, sometimes. Not all the time, but in small moments. A random memory, a certain type of music, even something as stupid as seeing someone play a mobile game on their phone. And when that happens, I don't think about the fight, or the divorce, or even the way it ended. I think about the good parts, the laughter, the late nights, the ridiculous competitions that somehow meant so much to us. And then, eventually, my brain drifts back to that one night, that one decision, that one small, petty act, deleting her Angry Birds profile. Out of everything that happened, that's the part that sticks. Not because it mattered, but because it didn't. Because in the grand scheme of everything we lost, everything we went through, that was the only thing I could point to and say, I won that. And even now, years later, I can admit it honestly.